I'm Eric Trometer. Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History. UK Cinema History, King Lear. 1971, director Peter Brook, and starring Paul Scofield.
I must say I'm not expecting a ton of people to show up for a 1971 black and white 16 millimeter, the film of a Shakespeare tragedy. But you know, uh, uh, a guy can dream, can't he?
Oh, definitely, especially in a Shakespearean world. We can let the dreams go wild. No, but I must say
Yes,
it was
yes.
really a good opportunity for me to go back and revisit all my like college essays and works back.
Gosh, that sounds like a traumatic thing. I would never want to go through that. I'm such a different person than I was in college. But then again, back when I was in college, we still had to make tools out of bone, and cars hadn't been invented yet, so it was a different time.
No, but no, I had great time doing these. The all this the language things, the new reads. I was telling you about like the new like 21st century criticisms, and that's interesting. That's really fascinating about like what Shakespeare among like, all these playwrights and writers. You find someone that I don't know, like stand to the test of time this long. And I, I don't know if it's a good thing for humanity that uh, we are still dealing with the same problems, or is it a bad, I mean, is it's a bad thing or it's a good thing? That made me wonder actually.
Well, I don't know. We're not gouging people's eyes out for treason anymore. So we a few things have improved since we're.
Yeah, but kids still gouge each other's eyes for like heirs, or there's still TV
Oh,
series like
what do you
Successions,
mean,
and
kids?
yeah.
I was gouging somebody's eyes this morning. That's just a normal Sunday for me.
Yeah, about that I have a few notes that I put there very cautiously, that I added in parentheses, it's awful to be the only woman in the room. The way that, yeah, we're going to talk about it, the themes of how you know fathers disappear at the end of the play and the movie, and yeah, things like that. Not
Well, and the
it's a
the fool just disappears. The fool just disappears. In the movie, it's later, but in the play, at the end of Act Three, Lear says to his fool, something to the effect of, "We'll have dinner in the morning," and the fool says, "And I'll go to bed at noon." And that's the last we ever hear from him. So we just assume he died of hypothermia or what have you. And then near the end of the play, he says, "My fool is hanged," but I assume he's talking about Cordelia and not his actual fool. But then the
but the
then
problem is, yeah, go ahead please.
the production that what's his name, Trevor Nunn did, the one with Ian McKellen, actually shows the fool being hanged and transfers the little speech that he gives to the audience to that, which I, on the one hand, I like that, because I don't think you have to be absolutely 100% true to the text, but on the other hand, I rather like the theory that the fool and Cordelia were played by the same actor, and it was because of this doubling that the fool just disappears, because that's when Cordelia comes back with the army from France. But then that would go against what normally happened when Shakespeare was a part of the King's Players, which was that those comic relief parts were actually improvised by oh gosh, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll remember it later, of course. But anyway, but by basically the comedian of Shakespeare's troupe. And part of the reason that the Fool's dialogue makes no sense to us in a lot of ways is because it was just kind of an amalgamation of these improvs that were being done throughout the play. It was kind of like, knock, knock, who's there? Orange. Orange who? Orange you, an idiot, for giving your daughters your kingdom. Stuff like that,
So, and that
Which,
explains why it's so appealing to Peter Brook. That's what he digs. That's what he loved all his life. All these literally and word games and language plays and everything about this play. It's like it was written for this man to adapt and
well,
make a movie.
without this production, I don't think you'd have a Tom Stoppard, quite honestly, because it was Stoppard, and I don't think you'd have an Edward Bond either. Pinter, you'd still have a Pinter because Pinter, but the idea of merging the theater, the cruel, and the absurd with Shakespeare was really, and we'll get into this, but I think and Stoppard not only Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, but also you know something as commercial as Shakespeare in Love was Tom Stoppard, and he co-wrote Brazil, and Edward Bond, of course, wrote the dialogue for the movie Blow Up, and he also wrote a version of Lear, a very violent one, in which he actually has Lear killed by Cordelia in revenge. I mean, it was a very strange play, but
Oh
but
my,
you
but
get my
I
point.
think now
It
that you
inspired
brought
a
up,
whole art form.
it is. But now that you brought up Shakespeare in Love, I have to say that movie was my Shakespeare turnoff. I mean, come on, and all the most overrated movie in the history of cinema is Shakespeare in Love, in my opinion. I don't know. I
Well,
actually
I
kind of like
distinctly remember I had seen it once in the theater in whatever year it was, 1998 or whatever, and I distinctly remember liking it. And I remember I was
really.
dating a woman named yes,
Oh,
I distinctly remember, like, I can't tell you a goddamn thing that happens in that movie today
oh,
because
okay. Oh, that
it's just
explains.
it's
That
just poof,
explains.
it's just poof.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
it's gone.
that
But
movie is connect in your subconscious is related to something else. So yeah,
I
we
was
have to
dating a
say for
woman
the
named
if someone's
Michelle
listening.
Huffnagel.
Yeah, for the
I was dating a woman
listeners,
named Michelle
this.
Huffnagel. And
Oh,
she's still my friend. She's still my friend to this day on Facebook. I have married since and had two children. Not my, or fathered two children. I didn't actually, lacking a vagina and a uterus, so I wasn't able to make them myself. But although I would have, you know,
you see, this is
but
the power of legitimacy and loyalty and faith
and
in
so when
Shakespeare's
people
play.
tell me what a terrible film Shakespeare in Love with it was and how incredibly overrated it was, I I just remember it as I had a good experience watching it. It's the same experience that I had watching Napoleon, which everyone tells me is so incredibly horrible, and I thought it was a hoot. I thought it was a riot.
Oh, I haven't
You know,
watched it, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like it. I know
it's a
it's
comedy.
kind
That's the thing. It's a comedy, and nobody's really getting that it's a satire of Ridley Scott's other films. And a satire of Napoleon. But and if you go in saying, "Hey," you go in the same way I went into Shakespeare in Love and said, "Oh, it's Tom Stoppard. There'll be a lot of puns, and this will be a bit of fun," as opposed to expecting some great fucking masterpiece. You'll have good fun, you know. And that I guess that's why the conspiracy of low expectations, so to speak, That's why I remember Shakespeare in Love fondly, quite honestly, because there was no hype about it at the time I saw it. You know, there wasn't Oscar buzz. People weren't talking about it as being the best film of the year. It was like, oh, hey, Tom Stoppard has written a comedy about Shakespeare. I like Tom Stoppard and I like Shakespeare. I'm gonna go see it. Hey, you know, and I enjoyed it. Can't tell you a goddamn thing that happens in that film though. Not a damn thing. Don't remember.
Yeah, I
It was
repeat,
1998. I was a different person then.
criticism are not precise. Yeah. So okay, I think if you want to ping anyone,
Yeah,
we can.
I'll do some more pings. I did ping a couple, but let me do another couple of pings, and otherwise, well, I kind of expected this, honestly. I thought it would
Yeah,
just be you and me,
the
but
problem is I'm glad
gosh, you
I
know,
yeah I'm glad
better
I
what better company could I have on a Sunday?
Oh, so do I. So do I. I'm so glad. I'm glad at least I have a few things to say. Otherwise, I'd be so embarrassed. Because it's so hard for me. I mean, I always feel so. Oh, here's Sila! Yay! There's our man. Hi, Sila. Welcome to the scoreless Shakespeare, Sila.
Yeah, you can't complain about the score on this one. Yeah, good to see you, brother.
Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi,
Everyone,
Sila.
good afternoon.
Sila, I'm looking forward for your Edith Piaf room.
That is very soon, I think.
Yes, very soon. I love what you do. Like you play, you go over the oh my god, that the play was the Breckton play was fantastic.
Yes.
Great reminder. Like put me in the mindset of theater and plays and made me go back and find my notes for this room, kind of. Thank you. You have very sophisticated, um, so another level rooms that remind us what is like in the back of our minds, and we have to go back and review them and everything. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How did you like our
So I saw this
Shakespeare?
film. Pardon?
How did you like the Shakespeare one, the King Lear?
I have said it several times in these rooms, and this is especially one of those films you need to see at least twice or three times. Um, so
I think this was my 10th viewing, so yeah, I guess I have to agree with you on that.
yeah, that's. I only saw it for the first time,
I
and
would say
I
Oppenheimer would
did.
be the exception. It's I saw that twice, and that was twice too many. I mean, once too many. Well,
Well, I usually cannot see things twice. I cannot play music twice on the same moment. I just cannot do that. I've never liked that. But um, so I didn't want to do it right away and or the next day, and I knew that meeting is today. So I decided to watch another movie on the same theme. So I decided to watch Ran, um, Kurosawa, and it was
oh,
very,
beautiful,
very
beautiful.
interesting. Very, I had seen it in the 80s. I believe I had seen it, but I must confess I don't recall anything from what I saw. But then again, that's 40 years ago. Um, but yeah, so I'm here mostly to listen. I don't think I could contribute too much. Um, but
Yeah, there's no musical score to criticize.
well, there's composer that did the work for the for Ran, but he based it.
Well,
First of all,
I'm sorry,
he based.
I meant on the King Lear because it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
have any music.
No, yeah, that was very minimal, but yeah, I'm
Minimal, there was no score. there wasn't a bit of music in the. I mean,
Okay,
even the fool sings a cappella.
yeah.
Hello, Adele.
How are you, Sila? That after watching Ren, such a great movie. The colors and the themes and that's hell of a movie. That movie.
You saying Ran?
Yes, yes.
Well, I think the main thing I would say to that is it is very impressive to see the minimalism in black and white, a la Brook, I think that's his name, and minimalism in color in the language of Kurosawa. I mean, there's and the acting, and of course, I've been in Japan a couple of times, and I was lucky enough to sit in a No play. I don't know if you're familiar with No, but it's basically the Japanese version of opera, the serious one, not kabuki. Kabuki is mostly operetta. So I'm familiar with that type of acting, but to see how they put Hidetura, I think is his name, who's supposed to be Lear, the things they do with his age and his expression, that's very typical Japanese. And then you have Scofield doing his very reduced facial expressions and then accentuated. Uh, it is very. I thought the contrast was very interesting to watch those two movies together.
Oh God, if we were still doing double features, that would have been the one that I would have recommended. But we did decide that double features were just a bit much to ask out of a weekly clubhouse show. I'd like to welcome Adele to the stage. Hello, Adele. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. This is I'm Eric. This is Jazzy and Stella. We're the three main people for this room. Usually we've got a couple more people than this, but this is a black and white 1971 adaptation of a Shakespeare tragedy. So of course, it's probably going to be a little thin today. Nice to meet you. What's your history with Shakespeare?
I learned it at school. I'm British, as you can tell from my accent. I have seen a few plays, um, um, but I'm mainly here to learn mostly because I think my knowledge could be expanded on that topic as well. But yeah, nice to meet you.
Oh, welcome.
Well,
So
I
indulge
think this
us.
is going to be.
Tell
Go
us
ahead,
more.
Yazzie.
Where have you? Tell us more about King Lear.
Oh,
We're,
you're
we're,
asking me?
You, Adele. If have you know, because I think I find it very interesting when they say Shakespeare is made. It's not made to be read. It's made to be watched, to be seen, also to be heard. And
a
I
goddamn
found
snob said
that,
that. A goddamn snob
yeah,
said that. It is made to be enjoyed in whatever medium that you. I listen to Shakespeare on audiobook sometimes.
but I think the way that
No, it's not. It's enjoyable in any medium,
yeah,
and we're gonna get into where that comes from. But whenever anybody says that to me, I'm like, that. How privileged are you that you live in a city where you can see Shakespeare perform? Because of course they always mean live, because these are the same people who tell you, but when there's an adaptation on television, oh, Shakespeare doesn't work on television, and they're always trying to limit how you enjoy it. Enjoy it however you want. If they make a rap version of a Shakespeare play, I'm there.
no, but I think
Good
that
luck with
aspect.
that.
No, but the aspect that the actors put emphasis on certain words, the way that the sonnets are recited, that kind of that I kind of understand that. I understand that, especially uh like, because I most of the time my relationship with Shakespeare is kind of cheating. I've read Shakespeare in other languages, and translations are easy, are kind of like the interpretation of the translator of Shakespeare. So it makes the actual text pretty easy. So when it gets to the original text, I think uh, at least hearing it, the as I said, the emphasis of the word, the it kind of leads you, steer you uh to the mindset that you're supposed to be, I think.
But what are we supposed to
Adele,
Hello,
what do you?
believe?
Yelena. Good to see you.
At the end of the day, it's interpretation. As somebody might interpret it a bit different than what you do, and how they express it, you might see a different way of seeing it. And I think it's quite ignorant just to say you can only see it in plays, where you can experience the same play in different areas and different scenarios, where you see it at a different view and a different point. I saw Killing a Mockingbird, but I saw it in reverse roles. So it was a female that was the behavioural problem, and they reversed the roles. So the women played the men's parts and the men played the women's parts. So at the end of the day, you can, and that was in Shakespeare's own home. Do you know what I mean? It's one of them places where you can see it in all different aspects and you can get a different view from it. So I think broaden your horizon. You might find you can read a play or see a play and experience it completely different.
Very beautifully put, Adele. And it actually leads right into my point about this particular interpretation of King Lear. We're not going to do a plot summary of the play because every time we try to do a plot summary on this, we get bogged down in plot and we never move on to the nice conversations. Uh, but what I am going to do is I'm going to open up at after I've kind of given a background history and ask people, where are the points where you were confused? Because there are, in the best of productions, this is a confusing, with 40 speaking roles. Um, this is a very, I was watching the Trevor Nunn version, uh, and I, who have seen this play performed probably 15 times, watched this particular film probably 10 times, and seen maybe 9 or 10 other media versions of it, still got confused in that version between Edgar and the Duke of Kent of whose character was doing what. Uh, and when you take something and you're putting it into, as Brook does here, a completely different medium, interpreted through a completely different art form, uh, you know, there is going to be some confusion. But what I think Brook does that the other directors don't is he's embracing that confusion, and so uh, the clarity that you get is from not knowing as opposed to knowing, because I think the main theme of this particular version comes from the 34 different utterances of the word nothing. Would you agree, Yazzie?
Agreed. I just wanted to say, and while we're doing that, I was gonna say I totally agree with Adele, and that's exactly what I'm going to do later in the room. That I'm going to give a very feministic view of the characters and the whole play, and also a kind of very slight, uh, like of the, as I told you before, kind of very modern criticism of the actual play and how they interpret it in Peter Brook's movie. So that's what we're going to do, I think.
We scared AI off or IA off by not calling on him soon enough. Gosh darn it. Yeah, that's going to be a very important aspect because, of course, 17th century misogyny is at the heart of this play, isn't it? Quite honestly, when you hear a guy quoting King Lear, chances are he's not he's not talking about old age. Chances are he's quoting some of the more misogynist lines in this. But then, are we as an audience interpreting this as Lear's actual feelings, or is Lear actually mad at that point? Is the question, because um, Shakespeare didn't write autobiographies, so there's nothing in Lear that's going to tell you anything about how Shakespeare felt about anything. He's not, he doesn't write with an agenda. Um, but Brook had an agenda when making this. So I'm going to go through my notes real quick because Yazzy's encouraged me to actually use them this time because I usually abandon them. But I'm just going to run through them real quick because it'll give kind of a history to this production, and then we can talk about where maybe the film succeeded in fulfilling its aims, and some of the places maybe where it fell short. And I think that'll lead perfectly into Yazzy's discussion of misogyny and the feminist point of view towards this. But to begin, the poster for this calls it Peter Brooks's William Shakespeare's King Lear, which I always got a kick out of. Kind of like Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, But so I retitled this Peter Brooks's Jan Kott's William Shakespeare's King Lear, a la Samuel Beckett via Ludwig Wittgenstein, in the style of Ingmar Bergman. Because if we're going to give an actual title, so and I actually think back to the monologue in Richard II when I think of what kind of inspired Brook to use this particular film style to create this. And it's that one that begins, let's talk of graves and worms and epitaphs, and let us sit upon the ground and talk about the death of kings. And at the end of it, he says, with solemn reverence, throw away respect, tradition form, ceremonious duty, for you have but mistook me all this while. I live with bread like you, I feel want, taste grief, need friends, subjected to thus, how can you say to me, am I a king? And in that, we see Richard II moving from heel to hero in that play. And there's a similar scene in the play version of King Lear that is not played this way in the film, in which Lear, after being rejected by Reagan, says, "Who is it who can tell me who I am?" And the fool replies, "Lear's shadow." So Peter Brooks originally created this particular interpretation of Lear for the stage in 1962, starring Paul Scofield, and it was based on a Polish critic named John Kott's essay, King Lear or Endgame, which was later published as part of the Shakespeare Our Contemporary. And I am going to do a quote from the essay. I'm not going to do a lot of these quotes, but this one I found important. Producers have found it virtually impossible to cope with the plot of King Lear. When realistically treated, Lear and Gloucester were too ridiculous to appear tragic heroes. If the exposition was treated as a fairy tale or legend, the cruelty of Shakespeare's world too became unreal. Yet the cruelty of Lear was to the Elizabethans a contemporary reality and has remained real since. But it is a philosophical cruelty. Neither the romantic nor the naturalistic theater was able to show that sort of cruelty, and only the old, new theater can. In this new theater, there are no characters, and the tragic elements has been suspended by what he terms the grotesque. And he says that the grotesque is more cruel than tragedy. The exposition of King Lear is absurd and necessary. The exposition of King Lear shows that the world is to be destroyed. When he's referring to the new theater, what he's talking about is what became known as the theater of the cruel and the absurd. And that, of course, began in 1953 with Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, a play where I think it was quite famous. I believe it was Vivian Mercer who described it as a play where nothing happens twice. But the play that is in the title of this essay is the 1957 Endgame, which was written by Beckett to I guess it was for people who thought that Waiting for Godot was too plot heavy, because it has absolutely no plot. If you go on YouTube, there's a great version of it with Michael Gambone on YouTube, and it's only about an 80-minute play, and it is definitely worth watching. But to go on with what Pat said, in Beckett's Endgame, there is a room with a wheelchair and two dustbins. A picture hangs, faces the wall. There's also a staircase, a telescope, and a whistle. All that remains of nature is sand in the dustbin, a flea, and the part of a man that belongs to his nature, his body. Ham, in the play, says nature has forgotten us, and Clove in the play says, no, there's no more nature. Ham, no more nature, you exaggerate. Clove, in the vicinity. Ham, but we breathe, we change, we lose our hair, our teeth, our bloom, our ideas. Clove, then she hasn't forgotten us. And he relates this to, as flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport. Now, Beckett considered himself a student of Ludwig Wittgenstein, who is a man notoriously hostile to Shakespeare, interestingly enough. And of course, he was an Irish writer who wrote in French and then translated it back into English because he thought that the English language was too evocative. It had too many words that could mean the same thing, and he wanted to write in a language that was more restrictive, because his large theme was the restriction of language. And that is where the 1962 version of King Lear begins, with stripped down sets and the dialogue cut to the bare minimum, like in a Beckett play. In fact, it whittles more and more and more, and as you watch the play, less and less is said until yet again you have nothing, because as the play points out, nothing will come of nothing. And so by tying in Beckett to
wait, hold on.
Go ahead.
Eric, I'm gonna stop you here. So because you're like going all like too far. Let's stop here. So tell us, like Sila Adele, tell us from like this movie, from your previous with what Eric said about the production and the beginning, and the kind of what do you think about the how your perspective or your interpretation of Lear was depicted through the lens of Peter Brook? What do you think? Adele, what do you think? Sila, what do you think?
Go ahead, Adele.
I see. Again, it's nothing because this is a play about nothing.
No, I, for me, there's two aspects. One is very realistic, namely that I know very well, I know very little about the content and thus about what is being portrayed to comment on it much. And number two, uh, the how can I say that? Um, there is this freedom of interpretation, which also has to apply perhaps even more to the freedom of misunderstanding and also to the freedom of understanding, namely not only what Brook or Kurosawa might want to interpret it like, but also where am I as an individual in terms of what's going on in the tone of Lear, in the tone of Regan or anybody. I think I know much too little about the essence. No, let me put it this way. I think, especially Shakespeare, is demanding too much, not in a negative sense, but it demands so much from the content, which is in certain ways very clear, in certain ways it is obscure, for me to just sit and say, oh, and clap after it's finished and say, that was a nice play. It doesn't, there's no room for that. There's only room for shaking my head. There's room for, I want to understand this. There's room for, I need to see this again. There's room for, I need to see other versions. I need to hear what you guys are talking about because there is so much that is being used and so much that is not being used. For example, in in Ran, I get the information throughout the film about what King Lear did in the past to to create this anger from the other people. In the Brooks film, I don't get any information as to why is Lear
Or
good.
the Shakespeare play for that
What is
matter.
his past? Is he a good man? Was he a good father? Why are these daughters such pain in the asses? So vindictive about what? What did he do? So there's a lot of space for interpretation, but even there's more space for, like you mentioned before, not knowing, just accepting it as a piece of art. But it is provoking so many thoughts about dynamics, father. It's to me, it's just a crazy play. That I don't mean
Well,
that
first
negatively.
I want to welcome Dominic to the stage. Thank you for coming. How are you today? Do you have a history with King Lear?
I don't, but I mean, as a maybe an amateur, uh, uh, I thought it was interesting that I was interested in the production as cinema, um, and found it to be wanting in that regard. Um, but you know, I didn't know if it was sort of a noir view of Lear. Um, uh, and I'm just wondering, is there any cinematic importance to the production, um, as opposed to plot and story?
A
Oh,
perfect
absolutely, and we will
question.
get
That
into
that
it.
was exactly what I wanted to talk about. I mean, by my question, I wanted to get to this exactly. That what makes this different from any other adaptation of King Lear. And with that, I just want to say something about the filmmaker, about Peter Brook, which I think is so important. He has his theories, his books about the theater and the motion pictures, and you know, he believes that the essence of art, the essence of everything, is silence. He believes silence is where everything begins. And he also, in his collaboration with Ted Hughes, in his like later work more in theater, he what was interesting, what like kind of absorbed these people together was the fact that Ted Hughes always talks about the moment, like when he sits down and starts writing his poetry, that moment before his pen hits the paper, that moment of silence is what he likes to dig in. And that moment of nothingness, that nothing, that emptiness is what he likes to dig in, and he likes to like put on the paper later. So I think that also goes play to the minimalistic aspect of Peter Brook's works, which is so important here aesthetically in this film.
But
The
but
way,
if you
yeah,
called
go.
his works minimalistic, Peter Brooks would be down your throat in a moment. He hated that word. Or Peter Brook, sorry. I
But
don't know why I
yeah,
keep trying to put an S at the
but
end of his
Brook,
name.
but Brook
But he hated
himself.
that word.
No, but because in Empty Space, he talks about it. He says he even uses the word. He says an artist has to use the minimal of tools at his depiction to create his work of art, and that's art. That is what you can call art, not a big budget, not big, like very, not even famous art, famous actors, because as you know, what he tried to do in his styles of acting and his plays was that he tried to make a group of actors that had nothing in common. They didn't speak the same language, they didn't have the same style of acting, they didn't have same
Yeah,
backgrounds,
his
and
famous, his international version of The Tempest. Yes, yes,
exactly the
which
international
is
groups.
not available anymore on YouTube. It's been taken down, and I wish I had illegally downloaded it because, good God, it's so
So
beautiful.
what he says, and I think that is something that is so important in this film, is a little bit kind of play to his Brechtian aspect. He likes the audience relationship, the relationship between the audience, the encounter, he calls it. He says the encounter between the audience. He thinks that audience are part of the play. He wants them involved in the play. And I think the way that in this film, the camera, we see uh, that very famous scene at the end when we see King Lear wants to, that moment of, grief and despair, when he wants to see Cordelia lips moves. He says, where is the camera? The camera is on Cordelia's eyes. You know, cameras looking like high angle to Lear. So we
Well, and
are
that
kind
goes
of
to
looking at
answering
him.
Dominic's question, and that goes to answering Dominic's question, Yazzie, which is
Exactly.
by focusing on faces, he is deliberately and filming this with a Danish crew, you know, um, in Denmark. He is deliberately using the Scandinavian film techniques of the Swede Ingmar Bergman, for example. Uh, the chiaroscuro lighting that he uses, the darkness between the figures, uh, all of those types of things. He's taken two molds. He's taken the theater of the cruel and the absurd, and he's molding it into Scandinavian film. And so where this film gets criticized as a film by film scholars is that, well, it has no style of its own because it's merely aping Bergman, and it's merely aping Beckett in terms of staging. But that's the point of the film, is the merger of the three: Shakespeare, Bergman, and Beckett. And out of that, he has created, in my mind, and this is a film that I consider. And there was a time when I actually listed it among my top 10 favorite films of all time. Uh, the reason it's not anymore is because I've seen more films than I did when I originally did, but it is still very, very high in my estimation uh, uh, because of that. And as a lover of Ingmar Bergman's films, I would say I would place this film below maybe Persona and Sawdust and Tinsel if Ingmar Bergman had actually directed it. Quite honestly, because I think it's that masterful a job. And so not only is he recreating Bergman's style, but he's doing it at a very top level. The fact that he used the 16 millimeter film instead of the shooting it in 35 was to gain that matte look that you get throughout the film, which may have been hard to see. Unfortunately, in a 320 print, this needs to be restored to a 4K. Criterion, do your goddamn job, you know. But but uh, uh, in terms of where I think it maybe fails, I think is as a Shakespeare adaptation. But then I don't think that was his point. As a Shakespeare adaptation, the last 15 minutes of this film, if this was your only interpretation of Lear, are going to be extraordinarily confusing. You know, you don't you don't have a clear idea. He lives, he dies. She betrayed her. Um, you know, the French army was beaten by uh, Albany's army. None of those things are made very clear to you.
So I want to
But
ask
I don't think
Dominic.
that was his
Hold on, hold
point.
on, hold on. I want to ask Dominic. Dominic, was it confusing for you, or did you go to
Yes.
this film? Oh,
Yes.
it was.
I found it purposely confusing that the story was less important than Shakespeare wanted it to be. That um, that he had something else to say in this film other than retelling the story of Lear. I think that was I kind of gave up on whether it made sense or not. I constantly rewound it and had to listen again. There's some great lines, and I just so many great things in it. So the question I had is, so how does this interpretation affect Lear as a art? That we're say, like when I was in high school or something, and we read King Lear, and we acted out parts of it in class and whatnot. Uh, and then the other question I had while Eric was talking had to do with, oh, I know what it was. Uh, there seemed to me to be very little money spent on the B-roll uh, of the film. Sort of like
That
that filler.
there supposedly is no B-roll.
Well,
They supposedly only had one crew. Supposedly.
so the little spots where the horses are going and they're going over the bridge, and the army's moving, and all of that seemed like, okay, we have to carry the story forward. We have to get dialogue is not going to take us anywhere. If we just are strict textualists, we it has to show us. I guess you might say
You have to get from Winchester to Gloucester
yeah.
to Dover
So I
somehow.
was wondering.
That
I was wondering, is he that kind of?
and yeah,
I was wondering if is
yeah.
Brooks
But
that kind of storyteller where he doesn't really spend a lot on driving the
he
narrative
doesn't
forward.
care. Yeah, yeah. If you watch his Lord of the Flies, which is a film we can't do here. I don't think because it just fails too miserably. He has a bunch of child actors. Some of them are okay. Most of them are actually kind of bad. And
Yeah, I saw that.
he post dubs them in the studio, so that you can actually kind of hear the studio echo all the way through it, which is fine in an Italian film because we've mentally made our terms with that all Italian films are going to be dubbed because they are yeah, well, because they built studios right next to an airport. But when you're listening in your own language, it's very, very difficult. Well, he's learned his lesson here. The sound recording on this is good, and whoever did the post dubbing on this and the gaffing and all of that does a great job. But it goes to, again, he doesn't give two craps about how the horses look going over the bridge, to use your example. He is merely concerned with the audience getting from Gloucester, in that particular case, to Dover. And he has actually said if he had his choice, he would just have one of those little animated maps like in Indiana Jones and put that in the film. But it would just look too silly. So yeah. So you're right on the money on that one.
What about the question?
But
What about the question of what this interpretation or this how he made the film look? What does it say something about
Can I?
Lear?
Yeah.
I
I wonder.
About
think that's a great that's a great question, and I'm gonna before Yazzie answers it, I'm gonna also ask her: does moving this up from Shakespeare's original time period of pre Christian uh, England to the 800s or 900s during the heathen Viking England, it all change the story for you?
oh, you're asking me. So wait, I just want to welcome Gotham. Hi Gotham.
Hey,
Do
Yassi,
you?
hi.
Okay. Do you have anything to say or
No,
right now, or you?
I'm
Oh,
just listening. I just came into in the middle, so I don't know what you guys are talking about. And
okay.
I think the King Lear will film. I think I missed on during my studies because I did masters in visual communication along with the history of films and everything. I think I bunked the class, yeah, when they teach King Lear. Now I regret for that.
So what I think about, like, especially the character of King Lear in this film and the depiction of Peter Brook, what I wanted to say before was I think it's so that aspect of the relationship between the audience and because and the play or the film is so important because what Brooks always says is when audience come to see something, they don't come to see our techniques or our like the way we present, and no, they're not critics. The public, they come because they want to wake up their imagination. They come to see a story. They want to hear a good story. So but if the story that we're giving them is something that they're already familiar with, like such an old story like Lear that everyone knew and there were different takes on it and everything, he likes to challenge the audience. He likes us to be provoked and evoked, and he likes to make something thought provoking. So because he says in theater the role of the audience is different because it's the actors are alive. They're like the interaction between two groups of people. But in theater, in movies, you're watching something through a window. So it's harder. So what you have to do for your audience is you have to open their mind. You have to like find a way to make them think harder. So, and I think the way that the play is a little bit abstract or confusing is this. It's because he wants to challenge his, have you seen the Godard's version? The Godard version of King Lear? That's crazy. That has nothing to do with Lear.
With Peter Sellars, not Woody Allen and Norman Lear and Molly Ringwald. Yes, yes. If anybody has not seen that, I can warn you against it and save you the time.
It's crazy.
But my favorite line is the repeated one Peter Sellers uses all the way through. He says, "This was after Chernobyl." I'm sorry, this was before Chernobyl. This is before
so
Chernobyl.
You know why?
He says that like 90 times throughout.
Don't go there because I have to say something about that. But Dominic, if you were asking about the King Lear's, like the character himself, what I can say is the way that Peter Brook plays his demise. We see this character deteriorate. He literally, in front of our eyes, from that king that turns the table, wreak that havoc, make that chaos in his daughter's house, becomes that pathetic ghost, the shelf of a king at the end that we see at the end when he sits in front of Cordelia and he talks about that he becomes an old mad man, and the way that camera and his eyes are, Peter Scofield's eyes are crazy in this film.
Yeah, and the way Brook films them. That's a large part of it because it's the focus on faces, that Bergmanian focus on faces, and the way that it's lit, and the way he is lit in that very broad Scandinavian way, is very evocative.
Through this journey, because that journey matters a lot to Peter Brook. He likes to put his characters through journey. He likes to take them from one place. He thinks that travel and trips and journeys, they're kind of
I guess we lost Yazzie for a second. I would also answer your question by pointing out that if you were a member of the audience of the 1960s, the Brook Scofield version of Lear was your version of Lear.
That matters. Not version of Lear. It's let's talk about it later. So we see that the psychological aspect of Lear, I think, in this film is really different from others. It's true that the way that Anthony Hopkins' interpretation of Lear is totally different. He doesn't he doesn't turn into a mad king. He took it differently. He doesn't howl and scream and mourn his daughter, but
he pushes a shopping cart around, and he's become one of the homeless.
That's very interesting. But what happens, as you were saying, Eric, here with Peter Scofield, this collaboration is to show a man that, like, his age, he's aging. Also, he feels betrayed. He feels, that theme, the theme of the parenthood. Like let's put the kings aside. Let's look at it as a father-daughter relationship, as a family team. Okay, let's look at it as a family team. The way that this father expected, he wanted to be respected by his daughters, and how they repay him, and how a king He lost everything because he loves a father who loves his kids. Let's look at it this way. That's what I saw in this film. I saw a father get disappointed. I think this is a movie about don't have kids. Kids suck. Please don't have kids.
Well,
Because no, yeah,
but
that's what you
I
say.
interpret it completely opposite from you, Yazzie. I have the complete opposite reaction, because in this version, Lear is a king who wants the power of kingdom without any of the responsibility. And as his fool constantly reminds him, a king without responsibility is nothing. That he has become nothing. He is Lear's shadow, uh, as the fool points out. And the degeneration of the king into madness is him realizing that he's nothing. And I think the most important scene in the film is in the storm, when he views the naked wretches having to suffer through it, and him saying, "This is something I have ignored too long." And then for a moment, he pictures himself out among it, and he identifies with Edgar as a philosopher who, and because Edgar is naked, he begins to try and rip his own clothing off. And that is Lear's realization that he, by giving up his responsibility, is not a king. And without a king without a kingdom is nothing. And that was my interpretation. And so in that, to Sarah's point about why are his daughters without having, and that's Shakespeare. This is on Shakespeare, because he gave no background information. You to fill in the stories yourself. Is Cordelia a daughter of a second marriage, perhaps? Why did he favor her over? All of these things you have to fill in yourself. But in the film, the daughters originally come off as quite reasonable. Why do you need 100 knights? Why do we have to take care of 100 knights? Also, these are our households. If you're bringing 100 knights into our household, then we are not in charge. You have not given it up power the way you said. You can't have this, and also without the responsibility of kingdom.
So
Of kingship.
let me say it this way. Now that you put it this way, so let's look at the I said the stylistic and the vehicle. Let's look at it from Dominic, Sila. Jump, interrupt us anytime you want, please, if you want, because otherwise, go ahead, Dom. Thank you. So let's look at it
Yeah,
as the dual.
we'll go all day if no one interrupts us. So this is definitely an
Okay.
interruption is encouraged room.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise we go on and on and on, and this fight can go forever if you're asking. So this
But we love
dual
each other very much.
storyline.
Don't get us wrong. We
Yeah,
do.
don't get us wrong. Yeah. So the duality, again, that's what I always like and what I always find in movies, the duality. Okay, and the duality, the dual storyline, it's not something that I try to find this time. It's right there. We have two families. Two pair of parents with their kids. Okay, so what happens here? Both families with toxic relationship, father, daughter, father, sons. Okay, and the flaws in the families. Okay, and the solutions that we get at the ends are different. So the juxtaposition of child and father character. So you were saying that you saw it different. That's the subplot of the story, of the play, as a matter of fact. So the key idea is flawed families. And I think, and and I was telling you, Eric, before that, so if we want to find how the story ends, where we can find the reason of the flaw, according to Shakespeare, who dies? Our fathers, actually, the father figures die. And yeah, so but the thing is, you can look at it also, that famous Marxistic view of the play is the fathers are the representatives of the society and the societal values, and that too. But to me, what I see is that toxic cycle of, if we have as parents, it's the same thing that I was arguing in when we were talking about if we as we demand respect from our kids, okay, so those kids gonna grow up and become adults one day. Now as Eric, you were saying that, okay, I think that the daughters had rights. So yeah, how about now that these kids are grown up, what happened to the expectations of them? And I think what happens, like going back to Dominic's question, what happens in this film, what happens through Peter Brook's lens, is how he puts the flaws, I think, just like Shakespeare, on the parents. I'm like, keep emphasizing on that. We see like how a king melts, and he is keep blaming himself. He accepts, and everyone around him, fool, can't, everyone's trying to warn him that you are making a wrong decision. You are going to the wrong path. You see, that's what I think. And I think, it's, yeah, kids has to show compassion and respect and, the children virtue of this Jacobean era. But, do parents at some point earn that respect? Don't parents need to earn that respect also? I think at certain point.
Okay, can we then go to the ending line? The weight of this sad time, we must obey, speak what we feel, not what we ought to. We are young, shall never see so much, nor live so long. King Lear is an 82-year-old man. We don't know his background. There are versions of this that suggest that he had sexually abused his two oldest daughters, Reagan and Goneril, and that's what causes their bitterness. But uh, to me, a lot of the action, why you just kind of immediately feel like you need to side with Lear, is around the blinding of Gloucester, quite honestly, and that I don't think you put on Goneril and Reagan the way you do when you're watching a production of the play or the Trevor Nunn version or the Anthony Hopkins version, where you see them as kind of active participants. Here, Cornwell is portrayed as such a psychopath that you just simply that you dump all of that ill will on him, and this is again in the film. But to go back to Dominic's original question about how this relates to the Shakespeare's, there is no definitive version of this play. Even back in Shakespeare's day, there were multiple versions with different endings, and the two that we draw on now, one was the Quattro, and the other was obviously the collected, the one from the collected works that were published a decade apart, have a huge differences, and Brook or any other director is kind of allowed to pick and choose. Like, for instance, the scene with the trial of the um uh, where he puts the chairs on trial while they're waiting to storm out. That is from that Quattro version, not from not from the published version. Most of the fools jokes are completely different, and so you pick, and so you've always been able to pick and choose with productions of Lear, because theater exists only in its tongue. It's not like a film. where you set it and it's before you. That one nightly performance is that one version that you're going to see. And in Shakespeare's time, this was performed in Elizabethan modern dress, just like the Anthony Hopkins version is performed in modern dress today. So you are already out of time as far as a production goes, and it is something because theaters were a business. This was a production that changed nightly. The Fool, most likely, we don't know this for sure, but most likely was improvising most of those lines. And what we're reading in the version that we have now is kind of a guesstimation of or accumulation of, again, picking and choosing what they thought maybe were some of the best lines, which is very interesting because in this film version, the Fool is never funny. He never has a line that is even that even will crack a smile. He's the unfunniest uh, version of the Fool that you're going to see in a production because sometimes they'll actually have like a little person and have the Fool actually sit on Lear's knee. Sometimes I had mentioned before you came in the room that it's believed that the same person played the Fool that played Cordelia simply because they don't ever appear in any scenes together and the Fool just disappears when
But I think
Cordelia
that the
arrives
scene
with
that
the
they're
French
sitting in
army.
but the scene that they're sitting in the coach, the Fool and the King, that dialogue is funny. And even the camera kind of, the medium shot of both of
You're
them
talking
in the
about
coach, and
why does a snail have a shell to put his
yeah,
head
yeah, yeah,
into, not
yeah,
to
yeah,
give
yeah,
away to his
exactly.
daughters?
So, but that's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. His delivery isn't though. It's not meant to be. And it's dead. He kind of his performance reminded me of Buster Keaton in a way. That kind of like the stone faced
You're
fool.
right. You're right. It's
Uh,
so Buster Keaton.
uh, he is not meant to. The Fool is not meant to be a jester. He is meant to speak truth. And where I think it might be true that the same character or the same actor who played the Fool played Cordelia is that would be a very natural doubling because they're the only two people who tell the truth to Lear throughout the play.
So
Uh,
what do you think, Dominic? Dominic, did we answer your question? Sila, what do
Yes,
you think?
I so appreciate your answering it. I'm wondering if the Fool is not like the chorus in Euripides, or in other words, it is a foil that, well, just going back to Shakespeare now, that the Fool represents the conscience of the audience who is trying to participate in the drama, and it is the Fool that represents the audience's conscience, and allows me to be
That's
a part.
interesting that you mentioned that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
interesting. From this production, from this
yeah,
film
yeah,
version, I could
yeah,
see that. Now, if you watch a full production of the play, which is 5 hours long, um, and so of course things had to, no matter what version you're going to see is going to be cut. The conscience of the audience is actually, believe it or not, Edmund, because he is constantly he is uh, to oversimplify it, he is like Richard the Third, constantly turning aside to the audience as he is evilly plotting to usurp his brother, or evilly plotting to bed Goneril and Reagan and become king himself and what have you. And as weird as it seems from watching this film, where he is just awful, and I don't mean awful in terms of the actor doing a bad job. I mean, he's just a terrible, terrible human being from beginning to end. You have no sympathy for him whatsoever. In the play, he is actually conscious. And it is interesting because, yeah, I think maybe you're right. I think Brook probably made a deliberate decision to uh, focus on those scenes because where huge parts of Edmund's role are cut, I don't believe there's a single scene with the fool that's been cut out of the film version that was in the play. And so you see a lot more of him than you do Edmund, which is quite the opposite. The fool is a very, very minor character in the play, and Edmund is in almost every scene. So
So another that's interesting. I'm happy to hear your analysis. That the other question that I recall being asked about this from one of my writing professors was list the resentments of each of the characters. Right? Give me a list of King Lear's resentments, which we're never told. I don't think what they are, and what his daughter's resentments are. Um, and I thought it was interesting. He said that there was this theory about there being some sexual abuse or something. Uh, um, but I was wondering what I wrote. I can't remember what the resentments were, um, but my guess is that he's mad at getting old and the meaninglessness of life, even for one who has power. It's still meaningless in the end. Um, so I'm wondering, I don't know, I wonder if that was Shakespeare's
his
intent.
anger is at the gods. His anger is constantly at the gods.
Gods, but who are they? Is that life? What is
Well,
that?
there is no God in this version. I would
Oh
say
Yeah.
there's
no,
nothing.
there are tons of interpretation of that. You know that there are. When we get to this point, it's a very, very large argument because we have this the Christian, the Samuel Johnson's read of Lear. We have this Christian reads of Lear. We have the modern
Well,
critics.
Samuel
We have,
Johnson's read
yeah.
of Lear cut the fool out. Samuel Johnson's read of Lear cut the fool out completely and changed it to a happy ending. Had
And
the
that's
French
that's
army
very
land,
that's actually
put,
very fascinating, that what he
and put
does,
Lear on the
because
throne.
yeah, you know what, because he says that
But
it's
let
why do you
me
think
just
it's a
add this last point.
tragedy?
Yeah, see, let me just add this last point. But he keeps the blinding of Gloucester, so he's not softening it in any way, shape, or form. Which is it's very, very interesting. So the gouging, you can gouge one of your main character's eyes out. That's fine, but you can't have your main character die and there be no king, because that is just reckless. Very, very interesting. Samuel Johnson is a very interesting man when it comes to his interpretations of Shakespeare.
All of, I recommend, to answer to Dominic's question, there is a very good like Emma Smith's like framing the narrative and like saying that why is it a tragedy, that I was talking about it with you, Eric, before, that it's so important to recognize the play as a tragedy, because it makes the reading of it makes the reading of this complex text so like more like easier for us. It makes it easier to interpret. So okay, I just want to make sure that we all agree on what, at least in this version that we are having right now, the Peter Brooks, despite the fact that Peter Brooks himself sees a lot
Brooke,
of
there's no S.
positive. Yeah, he says, okay, it's a tragedy, but there are lots of sparks of hope. And I really, really like that. He says the glimpse of hope in this movie, the moment that like, how to say, when Lear, following the question of Dominic, what to the character of Lear and his resentments, Lear, through his journey, we see a moment that he, he kind of, his sufferings, he 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 his demise, the moment that servant, that no-name servant, is looking for the eggs to put on Gloucester's wounds. So we as the audience, we see this, or the moment that Lear, he noticed fools being cold. They're very small glimpse of hope in this character, I think. And
Is that a
Peter
Christian?
Brooks
Is that a
Well, and
wants it.
Christianization?
interesting that you point out those two scenes. It's interesting that you point out those two scenes because if you read this play in high school, you won't see them because they're not in that final version.
Ex-
Those are scenes that Brooke plucked from the first version. So when Shakespeare rewrote this, he actually made it harsher, and he took out a lot of
Tate,
those bits of hope.
no, Nahon Tate, because he uses the Nahon Tate's version. I think
So I was
he
gonna.
uses that.
Is that interpretation? Uh, yeah, Yasi. It sounds Christianized to me. Pain, suffering, apotheosis. Sounds very Christian.
Both, both.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Both. That's true because some
They say Shakespeare was a
some
Catholic.
critics.
Hiding.
Yeah, but Peter Brook himself,
But he
he called
wasn't writing.
he
He wasn't writing autobiography, though. He wasn't writing
saw no.
autobiography.
He says it's
I'm going to
esoteric and
specifically say
profane.
you can't tell anything about Shakespeare from reading King Lear. I don't think. I don't think you can tell anything about Shakespeare from reading King Lear,
But
other
he
than his
said,
great talent.
but he says the he saw it as like he says there's no God there. It's like the esoteric and profane. That's what Peter Brook says. But the critic that I like, Frank Carman, he says that it's if we read it as like the notion of God, it's utterly comical. But since we all agreed that this is a very bitter and nihilistic play and it's a tragedy, so in this case, we can see all the suffering is how the world is. It's the readings after the Second
Well,
World War.
and Shakespeare is telling us that Shakespeare, not Brooke, but Shakespeare is telling us that this is a world without God in a way because it's of course set pre-Christian, and
Exactly.
the line he sets it up with is when they're about to go to prison, and Lear mentions that the birds for God to spy on them. If God is there, why would God need spies?
Yeah, and he says
And
the indifference.
so
If there is a
Shakespeare
God,
is
he's an
showing us
indifference
a
God.
world with no gods or gods that don't exist.
Yeah, that's good. I like
So
that.
Yeah, it is. And and it says if there is a God, that's a very indifferent God. So yeah, we rather think that there is no gods. That's what I think. And I don't know. It's Sila. Did you find God there? Did you see God? Did you? Sila is our man of God, so that's why we ask.
Well,
no, Sarah and I are both atheists. Thank
I'm
God.
curious why you asked me that question, but I would say that in those
I hope
times,
it was ironically.
yeah, but I'm taking it seriously anyway. Um, um, I was thinking about that a couple of days ago, in unrelated to the film, related to other things. But in those times, different to today, the connection, the conviction, the dedication, and the reality of a God being in play on everything was ever present. So, for that reason, I would say yeah, God was always playing a role in their minds, in their society, always in those times.
Oh, see that's
As
interesting.
flies, as flies to
Well,
wanton
it's not the
boys, so
case
are we
today, but
to the
back then,
gods.
yes.
They hunt us for sport. They hunt us for sport. That that's Gloucester's great line. Is he says some such. They hunt us as flies to wanton boys. We are to the gods. They hunt us for sport. I think sums up what this version of God is. And to Dominic's point, what is, when Lear goes mad, what is he railing against at that moment? It's not against his daughters. And what is he surviving at that moment? It's not against his daughters, even though he says it is. It's not against his loss of all the things that I have said that Brook is put into the film. The idea that a king without power is nothing. You know, what is he actually physically railing against at that moment? Can anybody tell me?
I think it's an existential angst, the
A,
meaninglessness
a
of
physical
of
hailstorm and the effects of hypothermia.
what?
A physical hailstorm, which, if I am living in 17th century England under King James, I believe that every single act of nature is the judgment of God. And when I see someone saying, go wind blow, out stripping himself half naked in the middle of a storm, what he is fighting is, in my mind, as a Jacobean English person sitting in the audience of King Lear, God.
I just want to parse that a little bit. So before we said that we can't find anything about Shakespeare in this play, but we, Eric, you just now said that we can find something Catholic about King. It was King James, right? He's a Catholic king before
No,
Elizabeth.
nope, he was, nope, he was Protestant. He was Protestant.
Oh, James was Protestant. Oh, I thought.
James was Protestant.
Oh, okay.
This was
So,
this was actually written right after the gunpowder plot, and was written as a
oh,
direct
so
response
Mary's
to it.
getting.
Because,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
to give the historical background, James was attempting to make Scotland and England into what he called the Greater
Oh,
Britain.
okay. So Queen Mary was
And
the Catholic. I'm sorry, I made that mistake. Yeah.
yes, before Elizabeth. That's correct. That's correct. Bloody
So
Mary.
there, so
But
there is no
and
nothing
this play, the
religious.
division of the kingdom was the important thing. That you can't divide your kingdom, and so you have the Duke of Albany and you have the Duke of Cornwall, and the kingdom is divided in two, and it needs to become one. And that was the overarching metaphor. Uh, uh, um, and so, in that way, in its time, it was a political play, and was first performed in front of King James. And in attendance with him was King James's own fool, interestingly enough. Um, so, yeah. But in terms of, when I say you can't tell anything about Shakespeare from a Shakespeare play, what I'm talking about is Shakespeare knew his audience and he was writing to his audience. The blinding of Gloucester is, how do I put this? Because guilty pleasure is is a hard sell. I don't want to put it that way, but it is something where we almost need to see it. And the Elizabethans loved their violence, on stage. Shakespeare's Titus and Andronicles is a perfect example. But up until Lear, he had always attempted in his histories to stage that off stage in the Aristotelian model. But then when James comes to the throne, they crave violence again. And that is written in as, and when you watch a very good production, which I think this is, in my humble opinion, of King Lear, there is a part of you that wants to see that, and a part of you that hates it. It's kind of like modern day body horror, how that works on you mentally, and that's what you can tell about Shakespeare, how he knew his audience, as opposed to anything autobiographical or what he believed in as far as, and we don't know for sure that he was a secret Catholic. That all we know so little about the real life Shakespeare that anything you hear about him, other than the year he was born, the year he died, the name of his children, the name of his wife, and that he left his wife his second best bed in his will is conjecture.
Ooh, really?
But I think
So
the no, go ahead, Doc.
I was just going to say, I thought it was, and I'm probably mistaken in this. I thought it was accepted that he was a closet Catholic, uh, um, and that much of his compromise had to do with being a public show of that he was actually the spy. He was one of God's spies, not God's spies, one of the spies that God needed during this Protestant revolution, uh, and that
Yeah,
everything
and they
he,
say this. They say the same thing about Marlowe, and they say the same thing about
yes,
Jonathan, and they say
okay,
the same
so
thing about every playwright of the time was a secret Catholic,
yeah, it does make it a little bit more
supposedly.
interesting if it was true.
And it's a great story. It is a wonderful story, and it's so much a better story than we don't know, and you can't pull it out of a play. If he was a closet Catholic, read his King John and all the anti Pope lectures that go through that, and his haranguing of the papacy all the way through that, and tell me that you believe that was written by a secret Catholic. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't. What I am saying is he wrote that for a different purpose. And we had mentioned Wittgenstein, who hated Shakespeare uh, because he just didn't like the language. And one of, I think, Ludwig's mistakes is that he says that you can only appreciate Shakespeare as a whole, not play by play, not sonnet by sonnet, not line by line, and that he can only be appreciated for his contribution to the language, because that assumes an arch in Shakespeare's work that isn't there. Each play stands on itself. It is just his best way of telling that story to sell tickets, because he was part owner of the Globe. And so the only way he didn't make a profit from the performance of his plays, he made a profit from the selling of tickets, because of his part ownership. And the fact that his plays were produced was because they sold tickets. And that was his number one goal. So he was, in a way, the Michael Bay of his time. And just like Michael Bay doesn't give a fuck about anything that you believe, neither does Shakespeare, unless it's gonna end up
So
in
okay,
a cash
now that you said Michael Bay, I want to talk about something else that you guys were talking about, like at the beginning with Dominic, and you guys said about the budget of the film. Don't we agree that why one of the reasons that Shakespeare is always been adapted, and we always see the different adaptations is always there? First of all, it's because film production is always about making money, and the one thing about Shakespeare is the first text is free. Shakespeare texts, they're public domain, they're free. So no, and we always know, at least for British audiences, or like they know that there are always certain type of audiences for Shakespeare movies or plays, so they always kind of count on the returning of the money that they're giving, especially in 1971. So I wanted to know, and now you say he was Michael Bay. I think why Shakespeare is all still appealing is because of the way that he had to write these plays at Globe. We know how he had to, because all type of people had to come and see it. He write for the masses and for the elites. They all see it, and he had to create characters that they were appealing to everybody, and the themes that they exist throughout human history, and they never change. The humanitarian, the human characteristics of sort. everyone finds himself or someone somehow related to Shakespeare. So that money is
Well,
always
it's
comes
the Bible.
back.
The Bible is a perfect example of something that's in the public domain that's going to have a built-in audience as well. If you make a Bible film, you're not going to have to pay anybody for it because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have long ago stopped pursuing their copyright
Eric,
on it.
you embrace the Santa look, the Saint Nicholas look. So like right now, you even refer us to Bible. It was the funniest thing I could
Ho
hear
ho
coming.
ho 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 ho, motherfucker! But Shakespeare, next to the Bible, is the next most widely. The King James version of the Bible is the next most widely read books in English. Just as an example.
You don't have
Has
to.
anybody seen that documentary, Looking for Richard?
Yes.
The Al Pacino documentary.
Yes, I did. That
Remember
was
the scene
wonderful.
where he walks out, he picks just a working class guy on the streets of New York, and he says, "What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say William Shakespeare?" And the guy says, "To be or not to be." Right? Who else could you do that with? Yeah, I was discussing Beckett at the beginning of this. If I walk up to somebody and say, a line from Waiting for Godot, they're going to look at me like I'm half crazy. Because 9 out of 10 people, maybe they've vaguely heard of Beckett, but you can't they won't be able to associate anything that has anything to
But
do with their lives.
if we take that observation that you just made and swing back to this film and the idea that it is being interpreted in sort of historical, intellectual historical context, where this idea of existential slash Marxist slash humanist kind of notions, modernist notions, and I kind of see how this particular version is infused with kind of like sort of the modernist take on angst and uh, uh, futility and even resurrection with hope. This the point that Yasi made earlier. So it is.
Well,
So
first of all, beautifully put, Dominic. And I'm going to only interrupt enough to say, Yazzie, when you ask why this film had such a low budget, what Dominic just said is exactly why this film had such a low budget, because it was appealing to a limited audience. Quite honestly, because you had to be in touch with existentialism. You had to be. This was not Romeo and Juliet. This was not As You Like It. This was not, Puck doesn't come in, man's eyes get gouged out, and the happy ending where Lear saves his daughter from hanging ends quite the opposite, and you are given hope that she is alive. The feather moves, and as you pointed out with the eyes, she's dead. That's why it was on such a low budget, and they didn't make their money back. So whatever producer did put up the money for this, uh, still gambled wrong.
the question begs the question for me: are there similar interpretations of Shakespeare using? Remember that philosopher, the French Foucault,
Foucault, yeah.
So that
Mm.
his influence on intellectual activity um, is obvious, I think, in this production. So, are there other Shakespeare interpretations of Shakespeare where that sort of revolutionary idea can also be seen? Modernist revolutionary thinking can also be seen.
Oh,
Well,
of course.
I'll go
I
one
get
step
it.
further
I
and
say
say there's always been
no. I can
modernists for
tell
the
you,
time.
Stephen Greenblatt and James Shapiro. These are the two critics of the modern critics of Shakespeare. They're kind of James Shapiro is a
I don't mean
historian.
critics. I mean actual productions.
Oh, the
So,
productions.
in other words, like this production, is there another production of another Shakespeare play that would be similarly infused with the
The current
philosophical?
production of Coriolanus, current production of Coriolanus is set in Iraq, just as
What
an
was the name of
example.
it? I missed it.
Coriolanus, the Shakespeare's Coriolanus. The current production of that, which is running now with what's his name, Spider-Man, the kid, yeah, Tom Holland.
Andrew Garfield. No, with
Tom
Andrew
Holland. Tom Holland.
Garfield.
Is
Also
it Andrew
Andrew
Garfield?
Garfield.
Oh wow! So the whole both Marvel universes are in it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
that's set in Iraq. Orson Welles set he had the Voodoo Macbeth. He had the Nazi version of which, and this was before the United States was even in World War II, of Julius Caesar. But every generation gives its own version of King Lear. The Victorians
Buzz
had their
Buzz
version of King Lear.
Buzz
You know,
Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet with with Leonardo DiCaprio. That's a modern take.
but to
You
to
guys are
answer
making
your
me.
question directly about
Yeah.
the existential, post atom bomb, pre Watergate, 1971 sensibility of 1962 to 1971 sensibility of this particular production, I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure there were. And we just don't know about them because they were in the theater, you know. But as far as films go, yeah, the there are, who did, was it Ethan Hawke who did the modern day version of Hamlet that was set right as soon as the internet had, yeah, it was Ethan Hawke.
Yeah. You're making me
It,
think of the
this,
time. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I'm done.
You're making me think of the time in acting class when uh, uh, we were asked to the first scene out of Richard III. You know, now is the season of my discontent. You know, and we had to do it in a modernist setting. You know, and find something that we weren't acting in history, but we were finding something in the now that would make it relevant. You know, and I always enjoyed that very much. You know, uh,
I would love to see a Trump version of Richard III, like Richard III as Donald Trump. That would be freaking. Let me just tell you, this is the winter of our
yes.
this is the worst winter of our discontent that I've ever seen.
You know,
Yeah.
when you learned that he was a
Or
hunchback and you had to do all this
I
stuff.
saw a great version of Richard III that was set during the Civil War, with
Oh,
uh, now is the winter of our discontent. Make
this
glorious
can I,
summer by the
like
sun, yo. It was great.
going back.
With
Have
whom
you
she
seen the
might
Dominic? Have you
identify.
seen the Anthony Hopkins version of this?
No, no. Is that
Um, it's I if you it's only a couple hours long and it's not
okay?
bad.
If it's on
You're not
Netflix,
going to
I can
gain
probably
anything great
find it.
from it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
it's not bad. I enjoy Anthony Hopkins is always good. It's not you're not it, there's nothing you're not going to get anything new out of it because it's very commercially done.
okay, but
But
he did the uh, uh, that guy who kills with the bugs and whatnot. He played that very sick guy uh, who eats people. What's his name?
oh, Hannibal
Uh,
Lecter,
Anthony
Hannibal
Hopkins.
Lecter.
yeah, he played
Anthony
that.
Hopkins.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
but
thinking of
he's
the
he's a line reader. He just reads lines that
yeah.
as Lear. He that's and that which is great. that's the version of Lear you're getting. But
Yes.
back to my
Oh,
point.
okay.
In that
Okay.
version,
I accept that.
Cordelia is shown in a French military uniform.
In
And
a
when
what?
Lear awakens and says, "Am I in France?" Right? Which, happens in the play, he's actually looking at her in a French military uniform, and she is shown actually leading troops.
Wait
And
a
she's
second.
given that kind of agency.
Hold on. Don't go that far. It's all in the play already. I'm gonna discuss this.
That was my next point. That was my next point, and it's cut out of the film.
No, you
But
don't.
that
You
was my
don't know.
next
You
point.
don't know. Or whatever. No, I'm going to talk about again. I'm going to emphasis on the feminism. Right now, we have it right in front of us. It's the names. It's the names that Shakespeare picked and give these characters. Okay. So, like, let's go from Cordelia. Cordelia, it's come from cordis. It's the heart. It's related to the heart. It's the heart and spirit. Oh, so let's go back a little bit. Like Eric, you were talking about the history of this. So we are in it, like, historically. We are having a kingdom that is progressing, a kingdom at its good shape. So how a king like promises a good future for the kingdom by giving them the future, by naming the heirs. So he's going to name the heirs these 3 daughters. So it tells us that everything at this point we have of everything is okay. Cordelia, we have the heart and spirit of a leader. It's supposed to be one of the kingdom is going to these people. So we have the heart and spirit of this kingdom. We have Regan. Regan is reges in Latin, the ruler, the authority. Okay, so she's supposed to, like, how can I put it, like, imbued his father's dignity and authority. And you see, they're already given to this, to these girls. Okay, and like at last, Cordelia, which is like in Latin, means uh like vagina. So it symbolizes the fertility of the country. Okay, the prosperity. Okay, so Shakespeare gave these characters these positive names. He does not want to say like they were bad from the beginning. He wants to say that the father wants to embrace their
I'm going to
femininity,
interrupt you
their
because
power.
Shakespeare did
Go ahead.
not give them those names. Shakespeare did not give them those names. The original story, which was the King, the Salt, and the Meat, dates back to about 950,
Okay,
and
and
those names.
what?
So
No,
so so
don't, the
those
names
names
are not.
those
No, no, no,
names go
no,
back
no,
to
no,
the
no, no.
original story.
The names are not coming from there. The plot is coming from there. The story is coming, but Shakespeare give them the name, and Shakespeare give them the themes and the characteristic and the arcs. That's what Shakespeare did to the simple plot. That's what happens. The names, Shakespeare give them the names.
But their names are
Okay,
Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia in the Chronicles of King Lear, which was published in 1692 and performed,
the
which
plot.
is a completely different telling of this story. Long before this was when Shakespeare was still writing Titus and Andronicles and those type of things before he even become a hit on the stage,
Oh,
which I'm sure
okay.
Shakespeare
If
saw
you,
that,
I'm pretty sure that the plot comes
and
from
in the
there.
Chronicles,
No,
the Chronicles, which Lear was a
mm-mm.
fictional character, but the Chronicles considered him
That's what Shakespeare does
him
with
and King
all the
Arthur and
play.
others. Yeah,
Okay,
but
okay.
yeah,
So
but the Hollenbeck Chronicles, their names are Regan, Goneril, and Cordelia.
So the
so
So
theory holds true
now
no
that
matter
that
what they
doesn't
were
mean that
named,
doesn't
right?
change your point at all.
No,
Yeah,
I
see,
think
it's
that's
just
sort of
that
an
it's not
authentic point.
Shakespeare.
Right. It's just that they were named by a different author for the same reason.
no, but okay. So I wanted to say, even if that does not work, I'm gonna like do a counter feminism. I'm bringing a counter feminism argument to prove my point. Like, we have a character like Edmund. So Edmund is here to again, going back to the illegitimacy and the family themes and everything there. So Edmund, I think he's a great example to see like men blame their flaws and their shortcomings on the fate and on the stars, and they don't take charge of their actions. But these girls, whatever they do, they stand by their decision to death. And I think these are very strong female characters, in my opinion. You know, they stand, and like, even if they're righteous like Cordelia, or even if they're wrong, or how we want to look at Regan and Gornell, but they don't, they don't put their blame on others, at least. I think that's to me, that was so strong, especially in this film. The way that the way that the camera always like put the girls on the like strong, in the light, the lighting on them. They're always in front of the camera. He never blurs the female characters. I think that's what I saw.
And that's a very good post-existential interpretation. But let me give you what the pre-existential, we're in an age before, which is hard to imagine because we're not those people. We're not in their mindset. Cordelia has a big heart, but a fatal flaw, which is her stubbornness, is what they're seeing. She's stubborn, and she's disrespectful to her father, and these are the fatal flaws, and that's what causes Cordelia to die. And it's so the tragedy of Cordelia in Shakespeare's time, that's what the audience was seeing. But, and this I will give to you, Shakespeare writes in such a way, when you look at the very lack of stage directions and like the famous exits chased by a bear, um, uh, uh, in such a way that the performer can give it a different spin. And when we're watching either a Brooks version or uh, a Trevor Nunn version, or I don't remember who directed the Anthony Hopkins version, or even the Russian version, we are doing so, seeing it portrayed by people who lived through existentialism and have incorporated that. And so and I'm not saying it's not there in the writing. What I am saying is that, are we seeing it in the writing now, or and would they have seen it then? And no, they wouldn't have. Cordelia would have been, gosh, what a big-hearted person. Too bad she was so damn stubborn. Well, it's a tragedy that she died because of her stubbornness. You know. And then the dishonesty and treachery of Goneril and Reagan, they end up poisoning each other, or in the Brook version, they end up smashing each other's heads out. Well, one's a suicide, but after it smashes it with a rock, just because that's much more filmic. And actually, that's one of the things I like about the film, is that it cuts out all the nonsense with the notes and all of that, which is great on stage, but passing notes is just not. It's something you want to watch in film. But I don't give credit to Brooke for bringing that element out so much as I give credit to Sartre, Camus, Ionesco, Beckett, Pinter, Bond, Albee, and all of the other people who have created this ability to see things from a selfhood existential lens the way we do now. And I give credit to us as an audience for being able to interpret it that way, if that makes sense.
It makes sense, but I also argue about Brook that I wanted to say at the beginning was that this man, when he traveled with Ted Hughes, he visited Iran, and he had this very amazing interpretation of the Conference of Birds, which is an epic poem of an Iranian poet, Attar. He took that, and the way that he used that in, with this modern look, he gives it this, this is a story of all the birds in the world that have a king and they don't know their king. So one day they gather together, and each bird represents a kind of a humanistic aspect, a part of human character, I can say. So they decide to go on this journey to see who is their king. And they go to this very tumultuous, very hard, difficult journey. And just imagine how Brook took this play, used each bird, put a human as a bird because he believed the language of birds, the musicality of birds is an international language. And I think it's brilliant. So he put people on that roles, and these
Have you
birds
seen his
go on
version
this
of
journey.
Mahabharata? Have you seen his version of Mahabharata, Yazzie?
Yeah, I wanted to get that because we talked about Oppenheimer the other week. So, and what he does to
I
Mahabharata,
watched it in the theater
comparing to
all
what
as one
Chris,
movie, as a 4.5 hour long movie.
all these things that we are
And
craving
what
today, the diversity, the political correctness, all that, he found this perfect way to do these things that people are fighting these days about. And he just does that in this very kind of modern, abstract form of theater. And I give the credit to him. I think the way that he sees these girls' resistance, these girls' ambition in this film, and the way that he puts the camera in front of them is brilliant. He gives them the agency, the power, and it's here. I don't know. I think he blames, as I just said, he blames the male character's ego to be able and ignorance. And because they've been given the power all the time, they forget how to use it. How the women has been marginalized. I think Peter Brook shows that in his film. That what happens when you suffer.
There's a lot to unpack in this film that we haven't even gotten to. And unfortunately, we've gone as long as the film, and you know how I feel about that. So we probably should start. We probably, I'm going to tell you why I hate longer clubhouse rooms is because if we stay here too long, somebody's going to pop in and make a point that we've already made, and we're going to have to discuss it again. And then somebody else is going to pop in, and so we do. I say sometime in 2024 we come back and do this film again, maybe as part of a double feature with another Shakespeare. And because there's a lot there's just so much to unpack there, and we barely scratched the surface of it. But let's start to wrap up. I have my ending as I always do, where I write something out to end the room with. But I'm going to do a once around. Yazzie, any final points you want to make on this? Keeping in mind that we're keeping this open for a later day and a later discussion.
No, I think that's fascinating. What about the actors, the Shakespearean actors? I think their power. Why it's so important that we call them the Shakespearean actors. Beside that point that I made, like that was a joke, that their ego and stuff. But I think before
And a
when
darn funny one, by the way.
when when there were men playing female characters and all that. I think that plays to what Dominic was talking about. I think that gender reversal is so possible to do with, because these characters were written in a way that they were possible. Also, I think we're making a mistake today to put, like, for like, Edmund, he's a young guy. I don't think that a young actor is at that level of, like, mind sophistication to be able to deliver this character. So it needs I think what can we do with the way that we adapt and change these characters? We can do so many things with them. That's exactly what you were talking about with this is what Shakespeare himself did. He took the plot from someone else and he kind of gives it branches and gives it the elaborate in the characters and make them grow. And we can do the same. And that's why he stood the terms of time, and the actors all along, that their devotion to deliver what he was trying to present and depict. I think that's so beautiful, that this relationship between the playwright and the actors and all this dedication in all throughout history since this man came to the world of theater.
That's why you're my favorite Yazzie right there. That's beautiful. Scylla, final thoughts on King Lear, or anything we've discussed today? Existentialism, whether or not God exists, I don't care.
I am thinking about modernism, or the modern, whatever we understand as modern, because of some points that were mentioned today. I go back to in the framework of interpretation or similar things. I go back to Shakespeare, and I think that in the 1500s he had obviously certain influences from before him. So in some ways he was modern. Then we go further and further and further, and we come up to today. We think John Cage was modern. Actually, maybe he wasn't. Um, and I'm just thinking of that because the way we think of versions, or what are they trying to do, or what is he trying to do, or what is he interpreting, or what he's getting out. Is he talking about politics? Is he talking about the heart, the vagina, and all these things? Every single one of us who is absorbing these films. When I watched this film a couple of days ago, then I watched Ran from Kurosawa yesterday, and I'm still digesting all these personas, all these, and Eric, you mentioned Bergman. All these things are in my head. All these things are in my system, and they keep going deeper in my system. And it is basically this modern aspect doesn't really exist. What do I personally do with a person who was born 600 years ago or 200 years ago? What do I do with his text? How do I analyze it without considering that what he wrote was for his time, not for mine, but obviously is applicable. The person who composed a piece 200 years ago, it was actually for that time. But everything is in my system, and everything is being translated the way, not only the way I understand, but the way I need it, or the way I'm, perhaps. I think there was a statement, now I'm not sure if it was in which of the two films. It was in Kurosawa's film, where the fool, which I love those roles of fools. The fool says, man is born crying and dies when he cannot cry anymore, or where when he has cried enough, or something like that. So I'm just very joyful or happy with the ability to be able to listen to you with your experience, with your points, with your opinions on Shakespeare, on Scofield, and just keep building and keep applying that to what I am. Thank you.
We love having you here. So, as a matter of fact, I had told Yazzie, this is a better room when you're here every single time. All of my favorite rooms, and the ones that I listen to again on replay, you were a part of. So we appreciate having you here.
Thank you very much.
Dominic, you get the final word before I do the summing up and do our plug for next week.
Well,
Because
I
you're basically our guest because
thank you.
this is your first time here. We give you the final word.
It's a terrific position to be a guest with you all. I just have to say, Scylla said a lot for me, um, and I can be brief because of what he just said. I will say that um, the conversation and the film, um, I don't know, there's this sort of intersection of modern uh, um, filmmaking, philosophy, and that intersection with what we might call the most classic textual uh, content. Um, and I was thinking of the Rashomon effect, and because Celia mentioned Kurosawa, and I was thinking when we started talking about different interpretations, how we might rewrite uh, Lear with with our new sensibility. Um, that looking at it from with a Rashomon effect from Kurosawa might be another interesting way to sort of bring out. Um, uh, we talked about using Cordelia's perspective, but anyway, I just am so lucky. How did I happen across this? Looking at my Clubhouse thing. I'll keep an eye out. Thank you so much. Appreciate.
Thank
Well, thank
you.
you
It
for
was
coming,
so
Dominic,
good having you.
and your contribution was tremendous. Great questions, and of course, great answers too. Go ahead, Yazzie. Sorry to interrupt.
No, nothing. I just wanted to thanks everybody. That's all.
So next Sunday is Christmas Eve, so we're moving the episode to Thursday this week. And it's going to be a special combined episode. It's still going to be 3 p.m., but it's going to be Thursday. We're doing uh, the life and death of Colonel Blimp, which is by a team of directors called the Archers, who are Powell and Pressburger, who, if you're a Martin Scorsese fan, you're aware of because they were very influential on him. As a matter of fact, his editor, Thelma Schumacher, was married to Michael Powell for the last 28 years of his life. Just, I mean, uh, so there'll be some Scorsese talk. And this is actually we're combining with the room understanding movies. Um, so they're going to be here. So we're going to have a variety of input. Vern and Daniel over there. Look for that on Thursday.
Leonard is
The film is free. Oh yes, Leonard, who's actually British.
yeah.
He's Scottish. Yes, yes,
It was
Leonard will be here.
actually his suggestion.
Yes, and he picked it. He picked it. Yes, yes. But yeah, he picked it, and I was, and they were going to do it in understanding movies, and I went Breaking Bad on their asses, and I was like, "Stay the fuck out of my territory. That's an English film. I am the one who knocks." And so they're coming here. I joke only a little, but but no, yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. Whether you agree with their perspective or not, it's a different perspective, and that to me is what Clubhouse is all about. I'm gonna end this room, and I'm gonna turn to Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream to send us away. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended. But that you have slumbered here, while these visions did appear. And this week an idle theme, no more yielding, but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest buck, if we have unearned luck, now escape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the puck a liar call. So good night unto you all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see you on Thursday. Have a great one.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we record this on the Clubhouse app. And by following the link in the episode description, you can add your voice to our crowd. Also, since you're listening on a podcast, do all the podcasty things for us. Liking, subscribing, telling your friends, telling your enemies too. They might like good movies. And thank you for being a listener to UK Cinema History.